Long before her name appeared in court documents, Mary Bridget Byrne lived a life that reflected the quiet routines of rural Ireland in the late 19th century. She was born in 1865 in the small community of Dunane, located in what was then Queens County, an area that would later be known as County Louth. Her early years unfolded against a backdrop shaped by recovery. The Great Famine had ended more than a decade earlier, but its consequences lingered in land ownership, employment, and social structure. Mary was one of 9 children born to James and Elizabeth Byrne, tenant farmers who relied on the land for their livelihood. Their existence was defined by hard work and uncertainty. Tenant farming offered no long-term security, and rents could change without warning. Yet despite these challenges, families like the Byrnes found ways to endure, guided by routine and necessity. One sign of gradual progress during Mary's childhood was access to education. The national school system, introduced earlier in the century, allowed children from rural households to receive basic instruction. Mary attended a local schoolhouse, where she learned to read and write. While her education was limited, it provided her with skills that were valued and respected within her community. As she reached adulthood, Mary followed a path familiar to many women of her time. In 1890, she married John Daly, a man from the nearby hamlet of Crickyard. John supported himself through labor, transporting coal between towns. The work was physically demanding and required long hours away from home, but it offered a steady income. After their marriage, Mary and John settled on a 5-acre holding in Clonebrock, near the main road connecting Carlow and Castlecomer. The area was agricultural, but its proximity to coal operations left a visible mark on the landscape. Fine black dust often settled over the fields, a reminder of the industry that sustained many local families. In the years that followed, Mary gave birth to 2 children. Their son, John, was born in 1891, and their daughter, Elizabeth, followed in 1893. With John Daly frequently absent due to work, Mary managed the household largely on her own, caring for the children and maintaining the home. From the outside, the Daly family appeared respectable. They attended to their duties, kept their property in order, and lived without notable incident. John Daly was regarded as a hard-working man, known to drink but not widely viewed as troublesome. His routine was predictable: long days on the road, returning home late, unharnessing his horse, and resting before beginning again. As the century turned, however, subtle changes became noticeable. Neighbors observed increased tension within the Daly household. Conversations among locals hinted at disagreements and strain, though nothing was spoken of openly. In small communities, familiarity often bred quiet scrutiny. Gradually, attention turned toward a man named Joseph Taylor. He lived nearby and was younger than Mary Daly. His presence around the Daly home became increasingly noticeable, particularly during the hours when John was away working. Though no formal accusations were made at the time, the frequency of his visits did not go unnoticed. Such observations formed the backdrop against which later events would be interpreted. In hindsight, these details would be revisited repeatedly, examined for meaning they may not have held at the time. By early summer of 1902, life in Clonebrock continued as usual. Fields were tended, roads traveled, and routines followed. Yet beneath that outward normalcy, relationships within one household had begun to draw attention. On Monday, June 16th, that quiet tension would give way to a sequence of events that would carry the Daly name far beyond their community. On the morning of Monday, June 16, 1902, John Daly set out as he had many times before. He traveled to Carlow with a load of coal, completing his work throughout the day. Those who encountered him later recalled nothing out of the ordinary at first. He remained in town until the early evening, attending to his deliveries. As John began his journey home, several people noticed something unusual. He appeared to be urging his horse along at a faster pace than was typical for him. John Daly was known as a steady driver, rarely in a hurry, yet on this evening he seemed intent on reaching home quickly. He arrived in Clonebrock later that evening and followed his usual routine. He unharnessed the horse and released it into the field behind the house. This task marked the end of his working day, a final act before rest. What happened afterward would become the central question of the case. The following morning, Tuesday, June 17th, Mary Daly awoke to find that her husband was not beside her. At approximately 8 o'clock, she asked her son to go outside and look for his father. The boy crossed the small field behind the house, moving toward the area where the horse had been released the night before. He returned moments later, visibly distressed. He told his mother that his father was lying in the field. Mary followed him outside. There, she saw John Daly lying motionless on the grass. She stood for a brief moment, taking in the scene before returning to the house. No immediate message was sent to the authorities. The reason for this delay was never clearly explained. Eventually, word reached the police, who arrived promptly and began an investigation. Officers found John Daly lying on the ground not far from the field entrance. His injuries were severe, particularly to his head. Blood was visible on the grass around him, and his cap lay some distance away. The ground nearby showed signs of disturbance. Marks in the wet grass suggested that a struggle had taken place and that a body had been dragged. From their initial observations, officers concluded that the incident involved deliberate actions rather than an accident. As news spread, the community gathered in quiet concern. What had occurred in the field behind the Daly house challenged the sense of familiarity that defined life in Clonbrock. Questions began to surface, shaped by memory, rumor, and observation. The following day, Wednesday, June 18th, an inquest was convened by Dr. Higgins, the county coroner. It was held at Plumbridge, close to where the body had been found. The proceedings drew local magistrates, police officers, and many residents who wished to hear the evidence firsthand. The case had moved from private tragedy to public record. The inquest opened with testimony from John Daly Jr. The young boy appeared emotional as he described the events of the previous morning. He explained how his mother had sent him to look for his father and how he had discovered him lying near a gap in the hedge. He told the court that he returned to the house and informed his mother, who then accompanied him back to the field. According to his account, Mary Daly looked at the body and told him that his father was dead. Sergeant Conlon was called next. He described his arrival at the Daly residence and his observations at the scene. He noted the disturbed grass, the signs consistent with a struggle, and the marks suggesting that a body had been dragged. Blood was visible, and John Daly's cap was found some distance away. Other witnesses spoke of John Daly's character. He was described as hard-working and generally well-regarded. Some acknowledged that he was known to drink, but emphasized that he was not considered aggressive. Several witnesses mentioned the local gossip involving Mary Daly and Joseph Taylor, stating that the relationship between them was not viewed as appropriate. Medical testimony confirmed that John Daly had sustained severe head injuries. The wounds suggested that more than one type of implement may have been involved. Death was attributed to internal injury resulting from those blows. After considering the evidence, the jury returned a verdict stating that John Daly had died as a result of deliberate actions by person or persons unknown. Although no charges were brought immediately, the verdict did little to ease public concern. Authorities continued their inquiries, paying closer attention to relationships within the Daly household and the circumstances surrounding John Daly's return home that evening. As the investigation progressed, police gathered further information about past arguments involving John Daly, his wife, and Joseph Taylor. The combination of testimony, rumor, and circumstance led investigators to take decisive action. On Thursday, June 26, 1902, both Joseph Taylor and Mary Daly were arrested and charged. The case now entered its most public phase. Joseph Taylor's trial began in December, drawing widespread attention. The courtroom was filled with spectators, and many more gathered outside, eager for updates. The prosecution alleged that Taylor had maintained an improper relationship with Mary Daly and that she had encouraged him to act against her husband. Witnesses placed John Daly in Carlow on June 16th and later near his home that evening. Police officers described the condition of the scene and the implements recovered. Once again, the most impactful testimony came from John Daly Jr. He told the court that he had been awakened by raised voices during the night. Looking outside, he stated that he saw his father and Joseph Taylor engaged in a confrontation. He described seeing his mother nearby and following as his father was pulled toward the field behind the house. He stated that he heard sounds consistent with repeated blows before the noise ceased. Afterward, he returned to the house. The courtroom remained silent as the testimony concluded. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict finding Joseph Taylor guilty. He maintained his innocence, but was sentenced accordingly. Mary Daly's trial followed, presided over by the same judge. Despite requests for postponement due to public attention, proceedings went ahead. The prosecution focused on Mary Daly's conduct, particularly the delay in notifying authorities and the instructions given to her children. Testimony revisited her actions on the morning following the incident, including the preparation of breakfast before contacting police. Additional evidence concerned a substance allegedly used in a prior incident. Medical testimony confirmed its harmful nature while also noting its common use in farming. Neighbors testified about disturbances at the Daly home in the days leading up to June 16th. Medical experts confirmed that John Daly's injuries were consistent with repeated blows to the head. In closing statements, the prosecution emphasized behavior they described as deliberate. The defense argued that events had escalated beyond control and that Mary Daly had not directed the outcome. After nearly an hour of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Mary Daly was found guilty, accompanied by a recommendation for mercy. The recommendation was denied. In early January of 1903, Joseph Taylor was held accountable. 2 days later, Mary Daly faced the same outcome. She offered no final statement and remained composed in her final days, receiving visits from religious figures who provided comfort. The case left behind a community shaped by suspicion and reflection. Court records preserved the testimony, verdicts, and judgments, allowing future generations to examine the decisions made. What remained were unanswered questions and the enduring weight of human choice. History leaves behind more than verdicts. It leaves records, silence, and lives forever changed. Thank you for listening to The Last Docket. If you wish to explore more cases drawn from forgotten courtrooms, I'll see you in the next one.